Okay, in this lecture I'm gonna talk a little bit more about nodes in detail, but especially the nodes that we're going to use for building up our scene and creating our geometry. And the other thing that we're going to add in this video lecture as well is how to manipulate and control the viewport, because these are very important to know if you want to do something with these nodes and objects. Okay, so we're going to create like new geometry, but unlike we did before, we're not going to use over here the shelf tab, but we're going to create a geometry using a different way. So if you press tab in the viewport over here, again select it, press tab, you see you get a list of possibilities where you can select from, and we're going to add a cube. Now a cube doesn't exist just right over here. If we look at over here, we see we have all these subcategories, and we see over here geometry, and geometry is only like a geometry node and an instance node. It doesn't specify what kind of geometry is going to be inside. So if you want to have a cube immediately, you have to go over here to the shelves, and we're going to create, for example, a box. Let's do this again, pressing tab, going over here to the shelves, create, and for example, a sphere. Now, to be fairly honest with you, this is a method that I rarely use, or let's say I use it never. But it's just to show you how things work over here. What I do tend to do is over here in the network editor, which is basically the same, but you will see a slight difference. If I press tab, you see this list is a lot shorter. We don't have like the shelves option. It's not related to what we have in the viewport. So there are differences between those two. Now you're gonna see those differences are going to be much bigger if we are working within the object. So for now, I'm just going to create again a geometry just like this, and this is going to create for us like an empty object, and the empty object is shown by default by this box with the coordinates on them. Alright, the viewport. Like in Maya, like I said before, using the spacebar, left mouse button is rotation, middle mouse button is move, and right mouse button is zooming in and zooming out. There are some shortcuts. You can press the spacebar H and it's going to go to home, which is this view, or you can select, for example, an object and press spacebar G, and then you zoom in on a particular object. Right, so this gives you a little bit the controls. Another shortcut which is important, if you press B or spacebar B, you get like the quad view, but this is very limited, and actually in Houdini I never use it. The quad view is something that you can't just take over here in the middle like in Maya and change it to whatever size, so this is a bit annoying. It's something that you can use to switch around views. If you want, you can go to the top view this way by again pressing spacebar B, spacebar B, spacebar B. Now there are other shortcuts for that as well. You can press just spacebar and the numbers. 2, for example, is top view, 3 is side view or the front view, 4 is side view, 1 is back to perspective, and 5 is the UV view, which we're not seeing right now. Okay, so these are a little bit the controls which are most important right now. If we're gonna check right over here, we see on the side of these windows, we see all these little arrows. Now these arrows, they are useful to show or hide a set of icons which are helpful when controlling the viewport. So if you want to have like the maximum size of the viewport, you can do something like this, or you can make it smaller again or bigger. These functionalities, I'm going to show a little bit more of that once we're busy with the objects themselves. Okay, so now for the manipulation, we can select our objects and we can move them around, as you can see right over here. And we see you have like a set of control handles. The control handles is also something that you can control with shortcuts. For example, if you press E, you go to the scaling mode, and you see the control handle changing to that. If you go to R, you're in rotation mode, and press T, then you are in movement mode. Now let's go back to the first one, to shortcut E. So for the scaling, you have like several controls that you can use. If you take an arrow over here, you do a global scale on the object. If on the other hand you take one bar, you're going to scale in 2 dimensions right over here. And if you take one of the lines, you scale just in 1 dimension. This is how the scaling controls work. Now if we press R for rotation, we can do the same. We can press over here to have like global rotation among all axes, or you can rotate on each one of the selected axes. If you press T, you have like the transform to move the object in whatever direction that you want, and if you click on the middle, it glides over the ground. If you use Alt in combination with selecting this one in the middle, you can move it up or down, as you can see. If you press Control, you can set the middle control handle to move into 2 dimensions. So that's a little bit the same principle as what you have in Maya, like this. Now we can also make sure that all these control handles are not active anymore. If you press Escape, then you see there are no handles there, no matter what kind of object that we select, and we can't select any object in the viewport anymore. You can't just click on it. So what you have right now is that you can just move around in the viewport and you don't have to press the space bar. Now if we press Enter again, then you activate again the controls. So the combination is Escape and Enter. Alright, so this is like this very quick overview on how to manipulate a little bit in this viewing window. Now I'm going to resize this one because I'm not using what's underneath and we have a little bit more space to look. Right, so we have these objects. A few things about the network editor and the nodes that we see over here. Now if you look closer, we see these nodes, they have like 2 symbols on the side. One of them is an eye, the other one is an arrow. If we select the arrow over here, then I'm not able to select that object anymore. It makes it disabled or dysfunctional. So like this, as you can see. So you can make sure that a set of objects are not editable anymore, another set of objects is edible. On the other hand, what you have as well, you can just hide a certain set of objects. So if you click the eye, you can hide them away, making sure that they're not interfering with an animation or with something else that you're planning to do. So that's very easy to work with and to manipulate. How are these nodes working together? Well, it's a little bit over here you can set parenting systems. So for example, if we want to have the sphere as a parent, let's put the sphere then a little bit higher, you can connect to the sphere like a set of objects. Now what we're going to change over here is that we're going to keep the position when we're starting to parent. So we can select this and we can select these values. So if we now connect this one over here and I connect this one over here, then both of these objects became a child of the sphere object, and if we move it around you can see that just like this. Now you can change very easily to another object. So now if I change this one moves. If I change this one, both of them move. So as you can see, it's a very easy and handy way to set up hierarchies. You can just disconnect by just clicking over here, or when objects are connected you can take a node and start to shake it, and then the node is going to reconnect to the other object as well. Now the thing that you saw me doing was that I selected each one of those nodes to switch something on or off. Now in Maya you might be used to doing that. Like in the attribute editor, you have to really click for each object a certain parameter. Now Houdini does this a little bit in a more smart way. So if you select all of the objects, it's going to check right over here in the parameters which of the elements are in common. And so the most primary selected object is going to determine what's going to happen to the rest. So if I click over here, keep position when parenting, like this, and I'm going to check the other objects, you're going to see all of them have been updated. So I can do exactly the same, for example, for the position. If I change the translation, for example, to 0 over here, then the translation to 0 will be done for all the objects, as you can see right over here. Same thing with doing parenting. You select multiple objects, you connect one, and both of them become connected. So this is a little bit how Houdini works with multiple selections. We're going to add now a new object, and we do this by over here creating geometry right in here. Now by default we get this node inside, so like I said, it's just to show like a basic box with coordinates on top of it. Now if we delete this node, we see we just have like an empty container, a geometric container with nothing inside. Okay, now we're going to see two differences. So if I'm going to add a node over here in the network view, I'm going to add, for example, a primitive, a box, and you're going to see this object is going to be added right within this geometry container. So if I create again another box, let's go to primitive again, another box, you see I have now two objects which are being created within the same container. Now if I want to do the same with the viewport, let's say for example that I want to add a torus, then because we're doing this on the viewport right now, and because of a certain setting that we see over here, it's going to react differently. So if I go now to primitive and I add a torus, then we see over here the network editor jumped out this geometry container and created a new container with this torus object inside of it. Now this is often a behavior that you don't want to have, especially when you want to add curves, you want to draw immediately on the screen, and this makes it quite annoying. So let me go inside. For example, I want to add a curve by pressing tab, going to the primitive, and let's see, a curve. If I add it, you see it immediately, it creates a new curve object, and indeed I can create a curve, but I don't want to have like a new container. So let's remove that and let's remedy that problem. And that's something that you see over here on top of the viewport. Here it says with tool options, create at object level or create within context, and we're gonna set it to create in context. I want to have my objects created within the container I'm currently working in. So if I'm going to do this right now in the viewport, create tab and add a curve, then you're gonna see like this, it has just created again a new geometry node with a curve for us. Now again we see like all these extra buttons on top of a node, and let me explain to you a little bit what they are doing. This one is the same like with what you saw before, so you can select which one that you want to see. What we see over here is like a template view, so you can have like a templated view in which you can just see like a grayed out version, so you can switch around with all this. Now the eye has some special control. If you press control, for example over here, you see it changes into something different. It changes into like this movie strip. So the thing that we do right now by clicking control is that the eye right over here is showing the object what we want to see in the viewport, But if we start to render, the geometry container is going to show this object. Now, a reason why this could be interesting is, for example, if you have like a complex character, a character which has like subdivision, a subdivision node on top of it. So you can have like this box, and let me create like this new node, for example, a subdivide node, and the subdivide is going to subdivide over here the box. So let's do it with a lot of depth so that we see like several subdivisions for that box, and we get like a spherical kind of object. Now if you have like a very complex character, this may slow down your whole scene or your 3D display, and you don't always want that. So what you can do is over here you can select the eye in the viewport for the box over here, and you can control click on the movie strip, click on this one so that you have like a movie strip over here, and this will result that this part will be used for render and this part is, as you can see, used in viewport. So what I'm gonna do now is make a quick render, and the rendering is something you can find over here. So I select it, and then mantra will get fired, and as you can see, we see in the rendering a sphere, in the viewport we see the cube. Okay, what else do we have? We have also some other set of options. For example, we have now like multiple nodes over here and multiple objects, and imagine that you want to see all of them at the same time. So what you can do for that is you can create a merge node. I'm going to go just very briefly over that because it's now important to show what it can do. So the merge node adds or allows you to add as many objects that you want, and these are all going to be brought together now, so we see them all at the same time. So for example, if I add over here a transform node, I can move the object over here away, and we can see like the global end result of that, and then a subdivision on top of those. Now it's very important to know the difference between a geometry container and what we have right over here. Now this is one object, and this object is being generated by using like several surface operators. So that's really important to see that difference. This is not like you're working on the level in Maya that you think that you have like a cube in the scene. This is what you have, the cube in the scene in Maya. This is what you have if you're working in components. Okay, now we were busy with viewing this. We have this one, we have the template view, and we have some other things as well. We have, for example, over here this little lock that you see, and this is a cache. If you have like something very complex to calculate, and it takes, let's say for example 15 minutes to calculate the geometry that you need, then the next time that you want to start a scene, you don't want to wait again for like 15 minutes in order that Houdini generates the geometry that you need. So after that generation, you can just click this, and then it's going to store the data just as raw data inside over here. Unclicking it will make sure that everything gets evaluated again, and we see an update of the result. And this arrow is to make sure that you can bypass a node as if it's not existing. If you bypass, it's only going to use like the first connected node to it. So this box, the first box, is then going to be passed through to the subdivide. So let's bypass this merge, and we see what's going on. We see that this one is now being subdivided only. So this shows you a little bit how the nodes work, how you can create nodes on the screen, and how you can manipulate a little bit the viewport. Now a few things of the viewport which are very important to know as well. Again, almost all the things I say over here are very important, otherwise I wouldn't say them. These are certain kinds of displays, and something you don't use that often in Maya, but in Houdini they're quite useful. For example, you can show right here the vertices. In Houdini they're not called vertices, but they're called points. That's also something different to remember. You can show the normals, and right now there are no normals defined, so let me add a normal generator called a facet, and this can, by changing its parameters, make, for example, normals. So as you can see over here, you can view the normals over here. We can view also the point numbers, also very important to see, especially with using procedural things. You can use point numbers or like sets of point numbers to do certain operations. For example, if you would delete each one of those, each second of those, you get like very special patterns and things like that. You can watch also the surface normal. The surface normal is like the average of all the points together. You can watch also the primitive, so polygons in this case, the primitive numbers. You can watch the cage of NURBS objects. You can watch the vertex grips. Let's see what they are over here, but I hardly use this one, to be fairly honest with you. Vertex grips is probably something that you can use if you want to check how you want to change the vertices. This one is especially useful if you have like particles, so that you can see the axes and the directions. And you can set your own set of attributes, so you can add your own visible things right over here, your own attributes, but that's also something we're going to go in a little bit later. If you are in surface geometry mode, you can, as you see, select all kinds of things, and this is something that we do over here. We can select by clicking the arrow, and you see the shortcuts. For example, you can select edges like this. You can set it to selecting points like this. What you can do as well, it's now selected on points, but we can also add something extra. For example, select connected geometry. So if you select now something, even just if it is just one point, it's going to select the whole thing. Select the whole geometry is also something that you can do, and I think it's going to jump up. It's something that I'm not using most of the time, but again, yeah, it's all geometry, so everything that you select right now, and we didn't jump up. Select front and back facing. Well, I think those things are easy for you to see. The connectivity, how is the connectivity? Is it in the viewport, or is it UV connectivity? So if you want to select connected geometry, you can select parts which are only connected within the UV, and so on. Now these are different options if you want to select for particles or if you want to select geometry. So this is a common set of things to use. Right here you can change the way how you do selections, box, lasso, all kinds of selection methods. You can set what kind of manipulation that you want to do. As you can see, we have some kind of point selected, and I used this, and automatically it generated this edit node. So with this edit node, what I can do is I can just move things or scale things away. Let's put it to translate, for example, and let's move things to the side. So what we have over here is we have this object, a facet, and then after editing we get again new geometry. We have all kinds of snapping tools. So for example, if we take like this one point and we're gonna move it over here, and I'm going to switch on snapping, not to grid but to objects, I can move it, and as you can see, we can snap it to some geometry points. And as we have like front and back facing, you see that in this case it's snapping to the back faced objects. Okay, so this is it a little bit for the most important things right now, and I've shown you a little bit of the nodes and how they work I showed also a little bit on what kind of properties that you can display. So this concludes it for this small lecture.